Welcome to Conversations. I'm Orim Meikle. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I want to invite you to join me for an hour of engaging, informed, critical, but judgment-free casual conversation. It's wonderful seeing you tonight. It's a pleasure hosting this hour with you. I want to take a moment to introduce Bacola Watson. She's going to be helping me tonight in the chat with your thoughts, your input, your questions, and certainly we want to hear from everyone that's on the call tonight. Bacola, take a few moments.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this segment of Conversations with Orim Meikle. I just have a few things to address, and then we will get underway with tonight's conversation. So if you're on YouTube and Facebook, we welcome you as well. We want to let you know that you have an opportunity to join the conversation. We will be putting in a link if you would like to come over and join us in the discussion. That way you're heard. We will certainly make that available to you. So I'll be dropping that link shortly. We ask that you please stay muted until you are speaking, and that way we don't get a lot of feedback. I think that's all I have. Let's get the conversation going.
Let's get it started. Thank you, Bacola. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see Michelle. Michelle, thank you for joining us tonight. And we got Mark from Ottawa. Mark, welcome as well. It's nice to see everyone. Listen, last week we were talking about the state of the world. It was very generic, very general. Tonight I want to be a little bit more specific. I want to be timely. So I want you to think about the subject that we're going to be speaking about tonight. I want to talk about the relationship between the church and race. Race and the church. So I want you to think about it because I'm going to throw some questions out at you. But because there's going to be a lot of people on tonight, I want you to keep your thoughts as succinct as possible. Doesn't matter to me what your opinions are. We just want to hear them. Want to hear the best ideas, the best thoughts. What I'm going to do to sort of chum the waters tonight is I'm going to throw out a question or two for you to think about and jump right in. Because obviously it's a hot button issue. We saw what was going on south of the border. We also see what's going on here. And in fact, globally, we see that it's a conversation. And so we want to find out what is the relationship, if any, between the church and between race. Here's the first question I want to throw out to you. What exactly is race? When you think about that, you say, well, they're white race, black race, this, whatever. What is race? Is it a social construct or is it a biological fact? Could you identify a biological fact that says that there are many races, or is it something that we have over time developed, embraced, and perpetuated? So I want you to think about that. What exactly is race? When you think about it, you're looking at me right now. I'm a person of color. Are you thinking within yourself that Orim is a part of the black race? And you look at Joseph, and maybe Joseph is a part of an Asian race. Do you think like that, or do you think something else? The second thing that I want to ask you is, does the idea of race, whatever that is to you, does that exist in the Bible? Could you go to the scriptures and find the idea of race in the Bible? Or is it something that we have imposed upon scripture? So maybe it's something that doesn't even exist at all in the mind of God or in scripture, but we're still using it. I often hear a term, and I want someone to explain it to me because I'm struggling to understand it. They say someone is a part of a racialized community. I just need someone to explain what that means. I'm struggling to understand that. I have my own opinions and I won't let them out too early, but maybe someone can explain that. And here's another question. Whatever your concept of race is, do you believe that there is maybe a chosen race? And if there's a chosen race, could you identify them? Is it me as the black person, I'm a part of a chosen race? Is it someone else who is a part of a chosen race? So those are the three questions I want to throw out. Remember what they are. What is race? What's your definition of race? Does it exist in the Bible? And whatever your definition of race is there such a thing as a chosen race? And what race would that be if you had any concept of there being a chosen race? So I'm going to throw it out there. You can begin to chum the waters and let me hear from you what your thoughts are. What exactly is race? All right, Bacola, does anyone want to jump in? For those of you that are on YouTube, by the way, we're going to put a link to Teams in the chat because last week we found out that many of you are having a war over there on YouTube. We want you over here, and we want the war to be in Teams. So we're going to put the link. I want you to jump over and join us on Teams tonight so that we can continue the dialogue and the conversation. But the question is, what exactly is race? Let's begin there. Does anyone want to jump in and chum the waters a little bit? Nicole, has anyone dared to jump in?
Garrick is bold enough to
I will.
to jump on that, and then Joan, and I see
Okay.
Venice. The hands are flying up now, but
Okay.
we're gonna get Garrick to get us started, and then I'll go to Joan, and then
Okay.
Venice will come to you.
And Garrick, remember that if you chum the waters, you attract sharks. So be careful how you chum the waters. Go ahead, Garrick.
That's fine. I understand what people are talking about in terms of race, and I have a habit of using that term as well.
Okay.
But I'm coming to understand that really there's really only one race. There's a human race.
Okay.
And there's a variety of ethnicity within that race that we have over time developed differences in our cultures and our practices. And whereas I believe they're all meant to work together to enhance our human experience, they've also been used as a source of division.
Okay. So for you, one race, multiple ethnicities intended to work together, but for whatever reason, we are now divided. Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
All right. Who's jumping in now? Is it Venice or is it Joan?
Joan, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Okay, so to continue on with what Garrick said, I agree with him in the sense that there is just one human race, but over time, society have created this division with individuals by colors. So
Society created the division.
Yes, I think society has done that.
Do you know when and where they created the division? Could you identify that? You said there's only one race and
over time, growing up, I identified myself as being Black because of the divisions that they put out there, you know, with the various color. So if I look at myself, I would identify myself as being part of the Black race. If I look at, sorry, I don't know this gentleman on the line, but I would identify him as an Asian because our ethnicity is different, you know. So that's how I feel race has been
and where do
defined
those
over time. That
identifiers
society
come
has
from,
put
Joe?
in that
Society. So society is creating the
because there's
identifiers.
nowhere in the Bible that I see it being identified, you know, the Black race, the white race, the Asian race. Society over time has done that, in my opinion.
Okay.
Has
All right.
identified people based on how they look, based on their color, their ethnicity.
Okay. Thanks, Joan.
Venice, please unmute.
Good evening, everyone. I don't believe in a race. I think as the Bible has identified us as we've been created after a kind. So I think it's society that has come up with terming, I guess, maybe the different nationalities of humanity as race. I think the Bible only speaks of races in, you know, if you're running a race, right? Everybody runs to win. There's competition, but not with regards to humankind. I think society has created that, and I think misnamed it in terms of identifying humankind.
Okay, so for you, a race is not a kind. It's not a class or a genus. It's not that.
No.
So
No.
Kind is okay. All right. So
kind is after a kind. So the seed is in itself. So an apple will bear an apple tree. Humans will bear humankind, not a race.
Okay. Okay. Is there someone else jumping in, Bukola?
There is Contest. I'm sorry if I'm not saying your name correctly. Can you please unmute Giselle?
Yeah, that would be Giselle Contaste. Yeah, I agree with this because before me that definitely it's the idea of race is a social construct, and I think it was created to place one set of people or to differentiate and classify one set of people as superior relative to another.
Okay.
And I do not know exactly when in humans' history that the idea of race came into being, but I am almost sure it would have coincided with the Europeans going forth into the world to so-called discover various land masses, and so ascribed the term race to people based on physical differences.
Okay.
So for example, I read recently, like for example, in the United States of America, where, and I actually saw documents where the white race was defined as superior to others.
Okay.
But during the course of the American history, who have been defined as white has changed. So at one time, we're Italians, and oh, I forgot you said to be succinct. But for example,
no, that's fine.
Yeah, at one time where the Italians were classified as other than white and were so an underprivileged group. Sometime during the course of their history, Italians became accepted as white. So even man's definition of race
has evolved.
Okay,
so you're saying that no doubt at some point during European exploration, the idea of races was introduced.
Yes.
And before that, it didn't exist.
The idea of races. I think maybe the idea of nationalities.
Okay.
May have existed. Maybe nationalities and even creed as it relates to belief. So the Jewish people were a creed, not necessarily a race of people. I'm thinking.
Okay, we're all thinking.
Yeah.
Michelle, I think you're an expert in this area. Could you give us a sense of when this would have, if we're holding to the fact that there is no such thing as races, and now if there's somebody on the call that believes that there are differing races, please jump in right now. But if we're all saying that there is no such thing as differing races, there's only one, but today we're dealing with the whole idea of different races. When and where did that come about? Michelle, are you able to help us in any way?
I could, but I see Andrea's hand up, so I'll defer to Andrea.
Okay, defer to Andrea, and then we're coming back to you, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Andrea, you there?
Andrea, just unmute yourself and please go ahead.
Okay. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
We're able to hear you. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Good evening.
How you doing?
I'm well. I am well. Thank you. So, as an academic, I would say that I don't believe that there is a category called race, that has certainly any kind of biological, my phone just went off.
That's okay.
So I would not even say there is one race. I would not say that at all.
You would not say that, I just want to be clear, you would not say that there's one race.
No. I think that the idea of race in its entirety is a social construct. It's entirely a mode of organizing people that is really about power. It's not about biology. It's not about anything intrinsic in any natural or consistent difference between us. Scientists today overwhelmingly agree that even our genes, there is just no basis on which to say that we can use race as a marker or a way of grouping people.
Okay, so let's say we hold to that. Can you identify the when that comes into existence?
So Michelle can, as a historian, can perhaps be more precise, but my understanding is that it's a fairly recent concept that emerged in the 17th century, precisely as Giselle said, as
coinciding with European exploration
and colonization and conquest. So let's call it what it is, right?
So it's an instrument for furthering power.
Absolutely. So to legitimize, to valorize that process there had to be a way to mark some people as inferior to other people. And so we were organized in these different racial categories.
Okay,
And
just before Michelle comes, so today when we say, let me use Michelle for example, she's of the Black race, are we speaking correctly then?
No, I would never say that. I would
I'm not-
never say that.
Okay, I'm not saying you, but I'm saying in general, you hear people saying that I'm of this race. Is that incorrect speech?
Yes, in my mind it is. I
Okay.
might use community,
Mm-hmm.
but I would not use, say that somebody is of one race or another. I would use racialized, and I
Okay.
care about
Tell me
that.
what you mean by that, because that's what I asked at the beginning. I've heard that phrase, someone's of a racialized community. What does that mean?
So that indicates an understanding of how race works as a social construct.
Okay.
So whiteness, for example, in societies like Canada and the United States, stands in as the norm. So white people are not really race because they're taken as the standard, as the given. But people who
Then what are they then? If they're taken as the standard and the
they're
given,
just people.
so then what are the others?
Then we are the ones. So people who have different skin tones or speak different languages or come from different parts of the world get to be the ones who bear culture, who are the ones who carry race. So we get racialized as in constructed according to a perception of what our racial identities produce.
I understand. So here's my question again. So when we say that such and such is part of a racialized community, again, are we guilty of incorrect speech?
No, I think that's fine because I think that some communities are racialized.
Okay. Okay.
Right? So Black communities are racialized. They're constructed in a particular way, and there are certain kinds of stereotypes, for example, that are applied to them, are assumed to be true. Black men are criminalized. They're not criminals. They're criminalized.
So they're racialized from the perspective of the other group.
The dominant group.
The dominant group is the one doing the racializing.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
perfect.
And because race is a social construct, it can differ depending on where you are.
Correct. Okay. Michelle, could you jump in now and tell us where and when does this? Do you agree with Andrea?
Oh, absolutely. I agree with Andrea. And I apologize that I'm trying to change my name. I don't know how the tech is beyond me. Okay, so yes, I agree absolutely with Andrea. And just to pick up where she's left off with the racialization, when she says that it differs, it can differ on where you are. If you think of groups that are even further subdivided, so among persons of African descent, we have people who are coming from the Caribbean who are, twice diasporized, right? And so in places like the United States, many Caribbean people are seen as, quote, the good Blacks, while here in Canada, the same people are seen as the bad Blacks. How is that possible? It is the society that is racializing them in one way or another. So to speak to the historical source of this, groups were always, groups have been different for a long time for depending on how you see it. And so there was always a recognition of difference among groups, but ascribing quality to those differences is a fairly recent event. So as Giselle said earlier, she's absolutely on target here. 15th century, the Europeans begin to push out and they see something that they want and they begin to construct ideologies around why their group is the better group. And over time, that morphs into their group is not just the better group, it's the superior group. It's the intrinsically superior group. And every other group has to measure itself. So over time, as they gain power through economics, through politics, through war, they become, what Andrea said earlier, the standard against which everybody else is based. And so if they're the standard, the further you are from whiteness, the further you are from standard. So if the standard is whiteness, what is the opposite of that? Right? Everybody else falls in between, but the darker the skin, the further from the white the white standard, what is desirable,
right.
and we can go from there.
Do you hold to the position that even language, as constructed in a Eurocentric way, furthers that thought? For instance, you've heard it said that the definition of certain things like black in the dictionary, white in the dictionary, do you think it furthers that thought?
Absolutely. Language is not without power. Language does not stand passive. It is part of the political construct. I was just reading today about somebody many of us on this call might know about very well, Louise Bennett Coverley, right? And Miss Lou, in her time, put this on the table in her own wonderful, non-confrontational way. And she said, if the language that people from the Caribbean speak is to be devalued, then what of the other kinds of dialects of English? Because what we hear in Britain is a dialect of English. What we hear in Ireland is a dialect of English. But somehow it is the one that people of African descent speak that is devalued. So how language, well, this is Andrea's world, language constructs all. Language is power. And so what we say matters. Absolutely.
Okay, so then how do you get around the fact that most of us, when we read the dictionary, we see black, and it's generally defined as something that's dark or evil or not good? Then you go over there. How do you get around that?
Words change, dictionaries change. The definition of black being evil is a 15th century definition. It wasn't always that way. Okay. And you will see that, I think it was Giselle earlier who pointed out that even the definition of who is white has changed. Right. There are many books about how the Irish became white, how the Italians became white, because there was a time when they were not seen as white because they did not have the ascriptions of whiteness in some people's minds, and they had to gain those. So over time, words change, and how we use them will help to determine how words come to be defined.
Okay, hold that thought. We'll come back to that because that may be part of the solution or the way forward. But Cole, is there anyone that wants to jump in before we move one step further?
Yes, I'm actually learning a lot from these ladies who are the academics. Yes. But let's get Robert in. Robert, do you want to unmute yourself and weigh in?
Yes, I just want to talk about when we talk about race, it is as said earlier on, it is about definitions that people have put in, but we have what I call differentiations all over the world. If you go to Africa, I was born in Africa and raised in Africa. Tribal sentiments are very, very strong. I mean, here, nobody really cares about tribes, but you can see that the tribe you're coming from has its own, these racial tones that we are talking about. Okay. That differentiation, saying that you're coming from this tribe, that tribe is superior to the other one. So throughout society, there have been ways of dividing people to say this particular group of people are better than the other one. Until I traveled to the United States of America, when they talk about, racism, I didn't really understand what it meant, because for me, what I knew was tribalism.
Okay.
Right. So the way we look at it, if you take it, depending on where you are coming from, the differentiation have always been there, and dividing people and using that as a tactic of actually having superiority over one group, and using it also as an economic tool. It's always been also an economic tool that they use to be able to get one group to serve the other. So in Africa, when I take Ghana, for instance, the northern side of Ghana, they do all the menial jobs those days. And,
so you've seen this dynamic among people of the same ethnic group.
Yes.
So it's not even just a black or white issue. You've seen it among
not a black or
fellow
white
Ghanaians.
Yes. So the people from the north were not considered Ghanaians.
Okay.
They were initially not considered Ghanaians. So we had what was called the Gold Coast and the Northern Territories.
Okay, so let me ask this question to everyone on the call. What is it about us as people that we desire to have power over each other? Because it seems like, based on what Robert is saying, Andrea, Michelle, at the core of this issue is a desire to dominate someone else, whether it's individually, ethnically, culturally. What is it about us that we desire that?
Venice, I see your hand up from before. I don't know if you want to take this on, or and I see Mark shaking his head, meaning you want in on this one.
Yeah,
Okay. Venice, do you want to go first, and then
Okay.
I'll come to you, Mark?
Okay, let's let go Venice. Go ahead, Venice.
Sure. I was just going to make one quick comment, and that is basically from the fall of man. We've always desired to have control, to gain back control
over each other.
I think over each other. It was there from the fall of Adam, and then Eve's desire was to, not necessarily to be submissive to her husband, but it was to control. It's the fight back and forth with who's controlling.
Okay, so let me hold on to that, and let's say we'll put it over here. Let's say that at the core of this problem it's a sin issue. Let's just hold on to that, because it dovetails into the whole idea of, has the church been the solution to the issue, or has she furthered the issue?
Added to it.
Mark, jump in.
I guess we can spiritualize it, of course. Absolutely.
Should we spiritualize it, though?
I think, yes, it requires to be included.
Okay.
I think everything is spiritual first.
So the more spiritual we are, the closer we are to the solution?
Didn't say that, Pastor. Didn't say that. What I do want to say is, yes, it's a sin issue, but ultimately, especially for those tuning in from wherever, I think it's a heart condition.
Okay.
We classify each other, even if we're of the same race. We're always comparing each other on every level.
Okay.
And at that point, there is no inner gauge, especially without the Holy Spirit, that prevents you from somehow putting yourself in a more superior position, I guess, than the other individual. I don't think it's just a they thing who is classifying or has created this racism categorization. I think it's also a we thing.
Okay.
We as, if I can say that, as Black people also classify each other. So when we're talking about all of this, and I know we're jumping in different areas, we're talking a little bit about ethnocentrism, where one thinks a little bit more superior than the other, and we're saying that the whites are dominant from going into the history. But ultimately, I think it's a heart condition, because at some point, even though people want to see you improve, the reality or the heart matter is, even though they want to see you improve, they don't necessarily want to see you improve to their detriment, or if you're doing better than them. That's my personal opinion on it.
Okay, very good. Someone else want to jump in here? Because Mark is suggesting that it's spiritual at the core, and I'm asking the question, if it is spiritual, if it's a sin issue, should we who are spiritual or in the church be en route to the solution? Or has the church been a part of the problem?
But so, I would rather you say it's a heart condition from my perspective.
Okay, so a heart condition, and the church is here to deal with hearts, right? So we teach. You get a new heart when you come to know the Lord, etc., etc. So should we not be a part of the solution, or has the church, and maybe I'll jump to Andrea, has the church historically been a part of the solution to this issue of race, or has she been a part of the source of the problem?
So I think that in an ideal church.
What's that? What tell us what you think an ideal church is. Is it a whole bunch? Is it a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, a little bit of paprika? What is an ideal church? I want to know.
That a body of people who take to heart the scriptures, and in particular the teachings of Jesus.
Okay.
Then we must be part of the solution. But historically, absolutely, the church has not functioned in that way, and actually worked very consciously to provide the ideological basis was used, right, to both legitimize the concept of race as well as the subordination and subjugation of certain groups of people, particularly people of African descent, as well as, you know, indigenous peoples, although, you know.
That's a loaded statement.
Well, it is. The history, you know, the history
speaks
is
for itself.
To back it up. We only have to look at the way that the church, in quotation marks, is divided in the United States to see that the Southern Baptist Union, if I don't know if that's the exactly correct terminology, in the U.S. South, is still predominantly a segregated church with white people, you know, staying in their own buildings and Black people in their own buildings. We see Black churches getting burnt, Black people getting shot in those churches, sometimes by people with guns who say that they are Christians, right? So there is a divide that again started out of that negotiation of superiority, entrenchment of superiority from chattel slavery. And the church had a big part to do with it, right? So, you know, the slave Bible, there was something called a slave Bible,
right? You're
that
right.
Extracted every single reference to us being equal, to us being children of God, and only left sections that said, obey your master, do everything he says, right? And I shouldn't say master, enslaver.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
But so we haven't. Come on, we just have to.
The way you describe it, then this idea of race almost sounds satanic.
Huh. You said it, Pastor.
Oh, I said it. I'm behind the camera here, so it's okay.
That was a loaded side.
There's a whole lot of security around the facility, so we're okay here. But it does sound satanic, doesn't it?
It's not from God. And if it's not from God and it has a source, then it's from the other side.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. If we're right, I'm just saying if, and it seems to be satanic, has he found a group to be purveyors of it?
He's found many groups to be purveyors of it.
Okay.
Perhaps Garrick wants to weigh in. I know you've been waiting for a while to speak.
Come on in, Garrick.
Yeah, I would actually go even further back than before the fall, because in Genesis 1, God told man right after he was created, have dominion, and he never retracted that statement.
Okay.
So one of the designs of man is that man has to have a spiritual overlord. He can't necessarily make decisions completely on his own. They have to be backed up by somebody higher than him. But so when the fall happened, all of that allegiance and all of that direction stopped coming from God and started coming from Satan. But the urge to dominate never went away. So now it's redirected to your fellow man instead of being directed to the areas of the earth that we're supposed to dominate. Right?
So somehow dominion has been perverted.
Exactly. Twisted. As a matter of fact, the word wicked, if you trace it back, means twisted.
Twisted. Right.
So if we bring that up to throughout history, God has basically been on a mission to restore that relationship where he could guide man in how to dominate the earth that he created.
How's God doing?
Well, God's doing great. We not so much. Okay.
Right, because when you look at the world just through, let's say, through the lens of your eyes, you would think that it's not working, right?
Well, I think that God is doing as much as he can, but he's respecting our free will. Okay. So when the church was originally started, like if you think back to the book of Acts, for those on the call who are Bible readers, there was many nations assembled at Jerusalem, and they were all unified by the infilling of the Holy Spirit.
Did they have, Garrick, did they have a problem in the early church with issues of ethnicity and culture and nationality not many days after the day of Pentecost?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
you see, this problem hasn't been solved from the beginning because
it has not been solved, right? But here's the thing. If you read in Acts 3, it says they were all in one accord in one place. You go a couple chapters later, and there is argument among the Greeks that their widows are being neglected.
Right.
So
right.
as soon as God tries to unify us under his command, our humanity steps in and start pulling away at it. And that's been the constant struggle, which is why it says in Romans chapter 12 that we have to continually be renewing our mind, because we know that, because the Holy Spirit put that in there because he knew there'd be a daily struggle against our allegiance to God and our human nature, which seeks to divide and conquer and dominate our fellow humans, right?
So are you suggesting that all of us on this call have a problem with this issue?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so let me ask everyone on the call. On this call,
in a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm. On this call, is there anyone bold enough to say, I've got some ethnic biases or some cultural prejudices? I think blacks have rhythm. Is there anyone that wants to jump out there and say, I've got some of those issues? Or
I think we all do, right? Because
is that Reggie?
That's Reggie. Sorry, I did jump in. I jumped the line. I apologize.
No, you jump in.
I think we discussed this kind of last week, though. If God tells man to have dominion, dominion automatically puts in competition, right? It's about power. So are we twisting this because I'm supposed to have power, and then I'll turn around and I look at Mark, and Mark is saying I'm supposed to have power. So right away we're going to have a tussle, right? And we talked last week, and I know I belabored this point. Mm-hmm. Shouldn't we be learning how to work better in a competitive manner? Because it's been set from the beginning for a competition. From the very beginning, man should have dominion.
And in your mind, dominion means competition right away?
It means control. It means power. Yes.
And does it mean over each other?
Well, it's man. So man has dominion over what and who?
Okay, well, let's be fair to the text then. Doesn't it say have dominion over the fish of the sea?
Okay.
The fowl of the air and the beasts of the field? But nowhere in the text do we see it saying have dominion over Eve.
Okay, so then now
over Adam.
I'm looking for guidance here. Mm-hmm. Now when I see Mark, and I'm just using Mark because he was the last guy.
Yes.
When I see Mark, am I saying, Mark, you can't go and get that fish because I've already marked that fish?
Okay.
What do we do then?
Share the fish.
I believe I should have dominion.
Reggie, well, Arm says share the fish. Why wouldn't you share with Mark?
Or even better yet,
why don't you go? Mark wants to share.
Well, why don't
Mark
we go
will
one
always
step
want to
higher?
share.
Why don't we go one step higher, and why don't we do what the scripture says? Why don't we esteem Mark higher than ourselves?
That's a thought.
And by doing that, we're actually inverting the perversion. So why don't we do what the scripture says? Why don't we put others before ourselves? And maybe that's part of the way forward, rather than thinking it's my fish, because that is the problem, isn't it? The problem with sin is selfishness. Mm-hmm. It's turning what God says on ourselves rather than outwardly looking for the betterment of each other. Is that part of the problem? Yes.
Can we do this? We are already almost like 40 minutes into the program. Okay. We have 20 more minutes, and I see a lot of hands. I'm going to jump some people because some others haven't had a chance to speak, and I'd like to have as many voices as possible. So I'm going to call on Joseph. I saw your hand earlier. I'm not sure if you still want to weigh in. If not, I will jump to Frederic. So is Joseph still here?
Yes, I am.
Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Go ahead, Joseph.
Yes. Yeah, just to kind of add on to what Pastor's asking about why.
My name is Orim. My name is Orim, Joseph.
Oh, okay. Why is this people want to become more superior? I think that comes back, if people say it was sin, and then where does sin originated? And then it's because that people want to be like God. And that's what Lucifer failed. He wanted to be like God, and that's where the sin originated. And in Adam, when Eve, when she took the apple, that Satan said, "You can be like God." And I think that's where all the root of the evil is, and why we want to be superior than other human beings, because we want to be like God. And that's where I think the root why people wanted to be superior than others. And the other thing is, and you asked the question, is what is church doing a good job of leading the people in the right direction? That's what they should be doing, but I don't think they're not. And I think one of the reasons is that church consists of people who come in there with their own hurt, their problem, their baggages, and they want to be. If we were to be representative of Jesus, and we have all these baggages and hurt and flaws in us, it's very difficult for us to represent him in a proper manner. And so that's why perhaps the church has not been so successful in becoming the salt and light of this world.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Joseph. Frederick, do you want to unmute yourself now, please? Okay, if Frederick is not with us, there's someone by, oh, Frederick, is that you? Okay, there is a live CID with some numbers. Sorry, I don't have a name to go by, so please unmute yourself and please weigh in. Before I go to Giselle. Giselle, I see your hand. I am coming to you, I promise. So live dash quotation CID 788. If you'd like to weigh in, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Let's go to Giselle.
Yes, Giselle, please. Go ahead, Giselle.
Right, sure. Yes, and I'd like to go back to what Garrick said, and somewhat agree with him in that when we were created and we were given the mandate to dominate, go forth and multiply, but certainly it was not to dominate each other. It was to dominate God's creation. God's creation, and not dominate over man. But certainly since the fall brought separation from man. It separated us from the spirit of man. And where man doesn't have the spirit of God, we become carnal, or being led by ego, being led by self. Okay. And so that created the need to dominate over each other, and hence the competition, I believe, that was spoken of before. And even with respect to the church, I know we say on a Sunday morning, look at the most racially divided group of people, and it would be the Christians in the church. And I kind of wonder about that as well, because is it wrong for us to want to be in a group that we are comfortable in being?
Okay.
Yeah, the group where we have most similarities, we are most comfortable in. The thing about that, even as it's a water finds its own level, so we tend to gravitate to what we know and we gravitate towards the familiar. I think where the church has failed is to reach across the divide to each other, to unity. I think us needing to be in the familiar spot is a natural inclination, but we should not limit ourselves and create further divisions, but seek to bridge gaps and work with each other, even, if the divisions exist.
So somehow learn to come out of our comfort zones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got Andrea's hand up, and then I'm going to go to Joan immediately after Andrea. Please, Andrea, unmute yourself and go ahead, please.
Thank you, Bukola. I just wanted to say very briefly that when I think about the concept of dominion as articulated in Genesis, and I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of environmental justice, I don't think of it in terms of
domination.
or mastery. No, I actually think about it in terms of care.
Stewardship.
Stewardship and care, yes.
Okay. So that was what was in my mind, because I heard someone say dominate, and I would argue that the need to dominate was not there in Genesis chapter 1. So when you really think about it, I mean, there are many definitions for dominion, obviously stewardship, care, management, domination. I think domination is a post-sin reality. I think pre the fall, there's no need to dominate anything. You're not going to dominate the woman. You're not going to dominate the man. You're not going to dominate the animals. You're not going to dominate the environment, because what exists at that time is harmony. And where there's harmony, there's no need for domination. That word domination really speaks of war. And you're taking authority over someone in a very harsh and brutal way. I think we need to redefine dominion, obviously, post the fall. And I think you're onto something, Andrea, because in a lot of ways, when we think of dominion, we think of it being over others rather than caring for, stewarding the creation, and by extension, taking care of each other, because it's a family. You don't really think of yourself being dominant over your brother or your sister. You see yourself living in a filial setting. So I think you're onto something there.
Okay, we're going to go to Joan now.
Can I just jump in just quickly? And
yes,
also,
Reggie, because it was in your camp.
Yeah, because domination also is about superiority as well.
Okay.
Right? So it doesn't also always have to be the negative connotation.
But Reggie, hold on for a second. We'll come to Joan. But when you say superiority, again, go back to Genesis 1. Would there be a need for anyone to feel superior in that environment? Is it not an egalitarian environment where there's, watch, even this whole idea of men and women. In Genesis chapter 1, there's no distinction between a man and a woman. They are co-equal, sharing dominion. Adam is not greater or superior to Eve. They're equal to each other, sharing dominion. The idea of superiority, I argue again, is a post-fall reality. Would you not think? Do you think, let me ask you this, do you think a man, I know we're a little bit off, do you think a man is superior to a woman?
I don't believe that. I do believe that there are things that a man does in a superior fashion than a woman, but vice versa. It's the same on the other side, right? Okay. But I do think that in all man's existence, there is a need for that, because you have to eat.
Is that need a correct need, or is it a perverted need?
I don't think I have the answer for that.
Okay, fair enough. So Joan, thank you, Reggie. That's fair.
Sorry, 1 second. Okay, just to add to that, just looking at society today in a whole, as it comes to authority and superiority, it's structured in a way, because if you look at corporations, where everybody works, throughout their career, it is in a structure where there's some sense of dominance or authority or superiority over you, because there is a structure at the different levels, because you may have someone, who's very junior, and above that person, there's somebody more senior, and it goes right up to the top. So there will always be some sense of someone having some kind of authority or superiority over that individual, and there's always someone else looking to go above that, to reach that hierarchy, to have that control or that dominance in some sense.
Right, and then we use terms like subordinates, right?
Subordinates, yes.
Interesting.
Okay,
and then also, just
sorry,
Orim, you'd also mentioned about color. When we define color, being black, we always look at, black as being bad, but it's not always the case. It all depends on the context that it's being used, because if you look at your bank account, if it's in the red, it's not good, meaning you don't have anything in there.
That's right.
But if it's in the black, you're
okay.
good, because it shows that there are funds in your account. Right. So again,
context matters.
You have to get the context in which it's being used.
Got you. Thank you, Joe.
Very good, very good. So live, We've got about 10 minutes left. So live, I'm going to go to you again, try again, and then Frederic, please be succinct with your questions or answers. So live, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, hello. It's my name is Corey. I don't know why it came up as live, so I wasn't aware the first time.
That's okay, Corey.
What I would just add to the conversation is, I believe that when we talk about our body and we separate that from like our soul or the spirit, I think the body has a need to compete. It has a need for survival, right? So that's something of the body. And if you don't self-discipline that, like the rest, like the 7 deadly sins, you get ego, you get this lust, you get all of those things. But the soul has a need to connect, right? And that's collaboration, that's working together. So I think when people are not, when you don't have good self-awareness or self-control, there's always a need to compete. That's why we had wars, right? And then, you know, we have sports because we had to find a way to compete without killing each other, you know, and we have sports and we enjoy that, but it is competition. So I don't think we can get rid of the competition. It's a part of us. We have to figure out, how do we use competition in a constructive way? Because even if you have 2 little kids and you come in the house, one will say, look what I can do, and the other one will say, look what I can do, right? They're immediately being put into competition, even though they may not see it as that. They're not trying to harm each other, but there's a need in all of us to compete and collaborate, and it's always going to be there. But it's being aware that that's there, and learning how to harness it, and learning to discern which of the two is needed at the time.
Okay, thanks, Corey.
Amen. Frederic, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think Andrea mentioned that a little bit earlier, but when we're talking about dominion and we're inviting like the Bible into the conversation, I think the most important thing is like asking ourselves, who's the one that told us or gave us this definition of dominion? Right. And like when we invite race in the conversation, many people had spoken of this and talked about the fact that it was, you know, the 1500s, 1700s when it was invited. And if we look at the those who had interpreted it that way, they used it as a means to commodify, right? Commodify these people and use the Bible as their weapon of for commodification. And so when we're looking at dominion and we're defining it in many ways, similar ways as these Enlightenment thinkers or whoever came and thought about it in that way, where it's, you know, we're taking over, we are rulers of the earth. I think it's very problematic, and we need to ask ourselves what, the blind spots that lead us to define it in that same way. And then secondly, look at even indigenous thinkers, and whether it's from the African diaspora or even on the land that we're on, and seeing how they have defined it and the ways that it is so different from that, like the idea that we need to commodify things, whether it is human beings or even our surroundings, right? And there was this indigenous thinker that said, if you think that Jesus did not die for your dog, then you need to read your Bible again. And I thought that was so beautiful, because we think that there's this superiority that we have as human beings to not only within ourselves, but within creation and as a whole. Yeah. And so I think, so that's just the thing, like asking ourselves, like, where did we get these definitions from, and how is it still rooted in that era, like, you know?
I understand fully. So would you say that a huge part of the solution is in redefining certain things?
I think it's unrooting it, first of all. Like, we first need to unroot. Okay. Like, we need to uproot these understandings and these definitions, and even knowing where it comes from, right? And who brought these to us and to our understanding. And then also, it's also learning from the not so popular, like other people that are the antithesis to this notion that we've bought into.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Frederic.
Andrea, please unmute.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to talk just very briefly about language, and thank you, Frederica, for that. I really appreciated that intervention. I think that we need to be systematic about the way we use language. especially in relationship to race and concepts of difference. So even something like saying enslaved instead of slave, right? Or an enslaver instead of master.
And
right?
how do we do that, Andrea? How do we become systematic? Because I really wanted to be very practical. How can we, let's say, people who are believers, how do we become more systematic in our speech? You know, the Bible teaches that he that is perfect in speech, rather, he that offendeth not in speech, is a perfect man. How do we get to that stage where we're more systematic in what we say?
I think we sometimes talk less and listen more.
Okay, number one.
Also, pay attention to what we are saying, even as the words are coming out of our mouth. Like,
Okay.
seriously, right? I have seen Barack Obama, for example, take 5 minutes to bring
say two sentences.
And it's because he's processing every
Right.
single thing before it comes out. So instead of saying something, 215 indigenous, the bodies of 215 indigenous children were uncovered, instead of calling that a dark day, let us just say what it is. This is a sad day. This is a blight on our history.
Right.
Name it for what it is rather than, using something else to cover it over. And to go back to what you had said earlier, Orim, about do all of us have work to do? Absolutely. And in different ways, right? So I think that the work that I have really been doing in the last year or so is seeking to know what it means for me as a woman who is constructed as Black, as a person of African descent, to live in Canada, on Turtle Island, where thousands of years before my arrival as an immigrant, Indigenous people lived here. And what does that mean? That they were conquered, that their lands were taken away, and that now I get to live here, right? Whatever that means. And I'm not calling myself
I understand what you mean. I know what you mean.
Myself a conqueror, but it's my responsibility to know where I am and the history of that place and the hurt of that place. And then my job as a salt and light of the earth to find the way and the language and the heart to heal that place.
So I think I hear you saying it's time for us to slow down a little bit more.
Absolutely.
And think a little bit more and a little deeper.
Yeah.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Okay, we don't have any more takers. We've got about 3 minutes to wrap up. So last week I saw in the chat that we need to extend this by 15 minutes. A lot of people are really enjoying these conversations. So they're asking us again today to extend it by 15 minutes. But I think for now we will stick to the 1 hour because
let me just jump in there. We are not extending it for 15 minutes. One of the things we do as Christians is we enjoy our services. They get longer and longer and longer. We get exhausted. We leave tired. So we've made a commitment. Listen to the commitment. We'd rather end with you wanting more than sending you home exhausted. So even on virtual experiences, we're going to stay to the timelines. I've been guilty over the years of crossing over time boundaries and blaming the Lord. So I'm not going to do that at any point any further in our progression. We're going to stick to the time, 8 o'clock, but then we're going to come back again and continue the conversation next Wednesday. But listen, as we're closing, Bacole, is there anyone else that wants to jump in before I share my final thought?
I don't see any hands up right now. Giselle, you have your mic unmuted. I don't know if you wanted to say something very quickly.
Oh,
please,
okay.
Please go ahead. Go ahead, Giselle.
Right. Yeah. Just to I love what Andrea said with respect to language, and especially with respect to what's happening now in the world, where we are definitely at a pivot point.
Yes.
Where people are being enlightened about ills of the past with respect to these social divisions by race and by whatever else, if it's sexuality or what have caused divisions. And the thing about it is we have to learn the new language. And we must not be afraid to make mistakes while we're using the new language. But when we do make the mistakes, be open to correction and not be defensive. And let's move forward. In the same way, when we hear other people make the mistakes, let's, instead of pointing fingers and condemning, let's teach them, use it as teaching moments. So moments for us to learn as well as moments for us to teach. And the language, the language is changing. Yes.
Let's be disciples, and the word for disciple is the learner. As we follow on to know, we're going to know.
Yes.
I'm inviting everyone back next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. I want to continue the conversation. I want to see if we can flesh out some solutions, a way forward so that we can be the salt and the light of the world. I love you all. Have a wonderful night. See you next Wednesday.
Thank you, everyone.